Hello there. In this video, I'm going to have an exam review session with our past paper. The paper is IB Economics Paper 3 from November 23 exam. Let's give it a go. Question 1A1. Define the term common pool resources. Common pool resource is a type of good consisting of a natural or human-made resource system, having the characteristics of being non-excludable and rivalry. A2. The praise tragedy of the commons is associated with examples of common pool resources. Using a production externalities diagram, explain the meaning of this praise. Yes, the diagram should be looking like this, showing MPC located right side of the MSC, which means overall location of the product. Specifically, I can explain that the tragedy of the commons refers to a situation where individuals' unlimited access to a finite, valuable resource, such as posture, will tend to lead them to overuse it and may end up destroying its value altogether. And this is largely occurring in the use of common resources, since such good feature of having no private ownership and price mechanism often lead to the overuse of them by humans. The following information is about Portugal's GNI and European sea bass consumption. 3. Using the data in Table 2, calculate the price elasticity of demand for European sea bass following the change in price from 17 to 18. I can calculate the price with these values, which is 6. And then for quantity, I can get the quantity percentage change and price percentage change. And the PD minus 5.58. 4. Using the data in Table 1 and 2, calculate the YED for European sea bass when per capita incomes in Portugal changed from 17 to 18. YED is going to be calculated by quantity change divided by income change. So I know the quantities and I know the income changes. So percentage of quantity change, percentage of income change. So YD, this one. And additional information given, diagram given. Question 5. Using figure 1, calculate the impact of this tax on the producer surplus for the island nation's fisherman. Previously, the producer surplus must have been this much big. And it's going to decrease like this after the tax. So producer surplus before, after change. Do mind the unit. A politician was quoted stating that this tax is regressive and therefore unfair. Explain why this tax is regressive. I can explain that the tax imposed on pollock fishing is regressive, since the same rate of tax imposed to pollock fishing is giving different tax burdens on different individuals or different fisheries, especially those who have a big scale of fishing capacity and resulting higher revenue would find tax less burdensome, but it's going to be way more burdensome to small individuals, small fishermen, small fisheries. That's why it is regressive. The same politician argued that regulating the behavior of the local fisherman would be more effective than imposing a tax. It's one kind of regulation this island nation could adopt to decrease the risk of depleting the pollock fish stock in its sea. I would say quotas would work. Establishing scientifically based quotas for pollock fishing can help prevent overfishing by setting limits on the amount of fish that can be harvested annually. Following additional information. Question 8. Explain why collective self-governance can, under certain conditions, lead to sustainable management of common pool resources. This is a pretty deep question. In collective self-governance, the common pool resource users themselves establish and enforce regulations to protect a common resource of their interest. So the users of common pool resources will take collective actions to punish if someone violates the regulation or even compensate if things work well. So under the conditions of having clear rules to follow and strong community cooperation and trust, such measures, which is self-governance, can be successful. Question B, using the text data provided and your knowledge of economics, recommend a policy which could be introduced to limit the unsustainable use of fisheries around the world. In introduction, I'm going to briefly introduce the unsustainable state of fishing industry in the world, relating it as a market failure. And next, I'm going to present my policy recommendation, which is establishing international agreement. First, I should explain the logic behind recommending this policy, simply saying the reason why my policy recommendation should be convincing. I'm going to actively refer to the given information. Let me start with the fact that fisheries are often transboundary, which means it requires collaboration amongst countries to effectively manage shared fish stocks. In this regard, promoting and establishing international agreements or organizations can be a crucial policy when it comes to coordinating conservation efforts and establishing common rules and regulations for sustainable fisheries management. I can refer to the report from the World Bank given, saying that the situation is really tragic. Also, consumption is about to decrease even more. So I can argue that policy that I'm recommending is really, really necessary to sort out the urgent matter. And it requires global scale cooperation. And another evidence that I'm going to use to support my policy recommendation is the example of the lobster fishery in the US, which was quite successful. So I can say that with having proper and comprehensive rules and agreement amongst the countries, sustainable use of fisheries can be possible. Next is about my concerns and accepting limitations on my policy recommendation. As the evidence of the EU's fishing quota proves, there are multiple loopholes that hinder the clear and cohesive management and cooperation of the fishing industry management due to the very nature of fisheries being transboundary. And even if the global scale of agreement and regulation is set and in action, if the individual government deviates for various reasons, it becomes largely obsolete. As I already have read from the failing efforts of WTO trying to limit government subsidy provisions. Nevertheless, I do still recommend this policy since it is the way that can ensure the long-term sustainability of fisheries and the preservation of marine biodiversity. Question 2. The Czech Republic is a member of the European Union, but not of the Eurozone. A1. Distinguish between a common market and a monetary union. Common markets allow free passage of labor, capital, and other productive resources by reducing or eliminating internal tariffs on goods by creating a common set of external tariffs. On the other hand, monetary union involves all the features of the common market and additionally establishes a zone where single monetary policy and central bank prevails and inside which a single currency circulates freely. A2, outline one disadvantage of joining a monetary union. One obvious disadvantage would be the loss of sovereignty and following drawbacks about it. The data in table 3 show the prices of the items, blah, blah, blah. Question 3. Using table 3, calculate the expenditures of the typical consumer in the Czech Republic in 2019. Enter your result in table 4. All right, 2019. I know CPI, and I know the previous year is in previous year, so I can get the expenditure in 2019 with these values. Using table 4 and assuming 2018 as the base year, calculate the CPI for the Czech Republic for 2020. enter your result in table 4. Previous base year expenditure, 2020 expenditure divided by base year expenditure, then you can get the CPI for 2020. Five, using table 4, calculate the rate of inflation in the Kazakh Republic for 2019 and 2020. We can use CPIs. That's how I got the values. 5.09, 1.41%. Using your answer to part A5, calculate the real interest rate of interest in 2019, given that the nominal interest rate was 12.44. Wow, pretty high. Nominal minus inflation rate. So that's how I got one. Question 7. Explain 2 limitations of using the CPI to measure inflation. One problem with the CPI is that the index does not factor in the effect of substitution. Second, novelty and innovation represent another weakness in the CPI, since it does not factor in changes in the quality of goods purchased. Next, if in 2018, US dollar $1 was equivalent to this much amount of Kazakh currency, so calculate how many US dollars an American would need in order to buy the same basket of goods that the typical Kazakh consumer bought in 2018. Very simple question. I know the typical consumer expenditure in Kazakh Republic in 2018 from the table above, which is this, and then I know the US dollar and this much. Question 9. Define the term crowding out. Crowding out refers to the negative impact that government spending can have on private investment. Question 10. Using an appropriate diagram, explain the impact of deteriorating infrastructure on Kenya's potential output. And the diagram can be looking like this, or other diagrams can work as well, like PPC shifting to the left, or SRS potentially shifting to the left. Anywho, I can explain that deteriorated infrastructure can make it difficult for goods and services to transition from one stage of value addition to the next. Scale, this can erode productivity and limit future economic growth and potential output. That's why I shifted LRAS curve to the left. Question B. Using the text data provided and your knowledge of economics, recommend a policy to the government of Kenya that would lead to higher investment. My introduction is going to briefly introduce the country's economic state. Next, I'm going to present my policy recommendation, which is providing business incentives and tax benefits to FDI and MNCs. First, I can explain the logic behind recommending this policy, simply saying I should explain the reason why I recommend this policy. Let me start with the very reason why the country's investment is falling in the first place. The reason is because the investment that used to geared by the government fell since the government has too high budget deficit. So that's why government had to decrease the investment. And it also implies the fact that the government does not have its own financial capacity to accelerate the national investment, which means, again, it needs the finance from private sector. However, the problem is Kenya's domestic firms are mostly too small and they have lack of financial capacity to initiate investment in the first place, such as the text says that SMEs are accounting for 90% of the domestic business sector. And all in all, I can conclude that the government needs to actively attract foreign investors and MNCs. So how can you do that? You can do it by offering attractive incentives and tax benefits. These could include corporate tax holidays, reduced customs duties, or exemptions from value-added tax, or simplified customs procedures, things like that. So such incentives can significantly lower the cost of doing business in Kenya, and encourage further investment within the country. Next, again, by referring to the given information, I can talk about potential concerns and limitations about my policy recommendation. So the country still cannot ensure political stability, rule of law, and transparent governance, which can build investor confidence and mitigate risks. Second, the country does not provide clear and consistent regulatory frameworks, which are essential for creating a conducive business environment. So it's extremely difficult to actually attract foreign direct investment and sustain them in the first place. However, I do still recommend this policy because despite of a few potential concerns, I believe that the government of Kenya can create an enabling environment for investment by revising the legal systems, administrative systems, things like that, so that they can stimulate economic growth and attract more investment, create more jobs, and achieve higher economic growth. All right, this is the end of paper 3. Thanks for watching. Bye.